Hello and welcome to the Gold, Goats, and Guns podcast. This is episode 6. My name is Tom Luongo and we have a lot to talk about. It's Tuesday, it's December 3rd, it's 2019, and the religion of global warming is in my spotlight this week. And as the U.S. freezes and crop failures mount, Sweden has practically sainted Greta Thunberg, now asking children to mock her opponents as the UN summit in Madrid takes place. We're going to talk about that and more. But before we get to that, I want to remind you that you can follow my work over at my blog at tomluongo.me. You can follow me on Twitter at TFL1728. Live streams, they happen on YouTube every Monday at 8 p.m. and Friday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Warning, I'm a bad boy. I've got a potty mouth and I'm not afraid to use it. You can also support not only me as a verified publisher, but also anyone else who is by downloading and installing the Brave browser, where you can get paid in crypto tokens called BAT for voluntarily being served internet advertising as opposed to Google getting the money. Moreover, Brave severely limits the amount of spyware following you around the internet and helps protect your online privacy while saving you time and bandwidth by blocking all those data snoopers that are feeding the growing surveillance state. And lastly, you can support me on Patreon at patreon.com/goldgoatsandguns, where you can sign up for the private market reports I publish every Wednesday and Sunday, and or the Gold, Goats, and Guns monthly newsletter designed to wrap up all of the geopolitical chaos, global macroeconomics, and shifting cultural and technological trends into a retail investor-focused portfolio strategy designed to help you make sense of a world going mad. All right. That stuff's out of the way. Let's get down to the podcast. Okay, so it's pretty obvious at this point that we're looking at a final push to try and create some kind of transnational superstructure. President Trump has nixed the TTIP and the TPP. These are both transnational treaties designed to be superimposed upon national constitutions and to usurp national sovereignty. The European Union, as an organization, is designed around this model, and it's really, in effect, no different than the USSR. It happens to have a different face on it, not quite so thoroughly Russian. But the funny part about this is that the data is mounting that we're entering a grand solar minimum. And any of you who are following the climate debate closely will know that most of the data has been screaming that the planet has been cooling off for a long time, that there has been no net warming for almost 15 years now, that the data itself has been scrubbed, has been cleaned, man's hockey stick has been debunked. All of these things are right there out in the open for you to find and see and ask yourself the question, why is it that they're trying to lie to us so badly? Why are they acting so hysterically when the data ultimately does not support their conclusions? By now, Miami was supposed to be underwater. We were supposed to have lost islands, and the polar bears were supposed to be extinct. These were all predictions made back in 2000 when this stuff started, when the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, published its initial reports and its initial projections of where the temperature was going to go. And none of those things have come true, and all of those mathematical models that they've used have been shown to be not only inaccurate, but irrelevant. And yet, because they have the imprimatur of international science and international smart people getting together and saying and blessing it and saying that it's real, we, in effect, are kind of bound by it. And everybody wants to virtue signal about climate change, when really what we want to do is protest the rampant pollution, which, by the way, is usually almost always created, by some kind of government intervention that allows people to pollute without any legal consequence. And the history on U.S. case law and in other places is very clear on this. So, again, ask yourself the question, and those of you who are hip on this stuff, you know what I'm about to say. You know that this is all about the globalist push for more transnational government, where these other trade deals, super PAC trade deals, have not worked. The Paris Accords, they're trying to push that again. They're trying to continue to push that. And the thing about it is that this is also not going to work. It's really hard to sell this to people in New York City right now, or in upstate New York, that are buried under over 2 feet of snow. It's going to be really hard to sell to farmers in Kansas and in Idaho that are staring at massive crop failures. I've seen things about the sugar beet crop in the United States is terrible, and the sugar prices are pushing up towards 13 cents a pound. It's going to be hard to tell Idaho potato farmers, who are probably going to lose as much as 30, if not 40% of their harvest this year. a harvest so bad and so rotten they can't even sell most of the potatoes, the marginal stock. They can't even sell it as silage to the cow and pig farmers. This is what we're dealing with. And the USDA, we know, is probably lying about their data at this point. So we know all these things. We even see this stuff coming on for years, and yet nothing seems to change. As a matter of fact, what's been happening has been a ramping up of the hysteria. And so we've got the Madrid summit happening right now, and UN General Secretary Gutierrez is there telling everybody that if we don't come up with a coordinated plan of action, and if the member states who are here today, if they don't come up with a comprehensive and clear plan of action, and then it's a complete betrayal of our human family. That's a quote. A complete betrayal of our human family. That's absolute nonsensical virtue signaling of the highest degree. When really, what climate change policy is all about is about not allowing the third world to enter the second and, or God forbid, the first world. Because, we don't want brown people getting rich. That just won't do for rich white Europeans. This is one of the rare times you will hear me get on white people, because I don't really care about any of that stuff. But white Europeans have a real frickin' problem in terms of how they view the rest of the world. And what they're really reacting to here is the potential for them to lose a lot and lose control over the development of the world. Like, it's okay for the world to develop, but as long as they get to remain in charge. And it doesn't matter if we're talking about the Americans here, or the Brits, or the French, or the Germans, or anybody else. They all feel the same way. These people, the Davos crowd, the transnational globalists, whatever you want to call them, they're all the same. They want to be in control, and we, the plebes, have to, eat bugs now, or fake meat, and genuflect at the altar of the great saint Greta Thunberg, which is insane. When the reality is that we're staring at record snowfalls already in the West, in the United States, and other places. This is not just the United States, but in places like Turkey and Eastern Europe and other places around the world. We're seeing this already, which is going to exacerbate. It's going to create even worse snowmelts in 2020 than we saw in 2019, which delayed plantings by over a month and then pushed us into a late harvest, which then got crushed in all the early frost and all the early snows. This is what happens when the climate changes rapidly. And we have plenty of data, if we actually look at the data, that says that when things like what's happening with the sun happen, the climate changes very, very quickly. It's none of this partial, gradual stuff that we have to, we could see a 0.5 degree rise in the temperature over the course of the next 100 years, and that would just be a catastrophe, and I don't know what to do about it all. I mean, we're talking about the potential for an ice age here, and like the Chesapeake River being frozen in June, and people are worried about a 0.5 degree rise in temperatures. Like, I still don't understand why we're supposed to be so upset about there being too much heat in our little corner of the universe. It's a cold, indifferent, hostile universe that literally wants to kill us. And these people have now convinced themselves through the worst kind of emotional blackmail that we're all going to die. It is literally insane. And I spoke earlier about oat and sugar prices, but we're seeing it in oat prices. We're seeing it in wheat prices. They're all bumping up against 5-year highs. Corn is trying to, but I don't think the USDA or anybody in power wants to see corn prices pop above $4 a bushel. And there's always the possibility that, there's a lot of shifting happening within the corn market. And certainly Trump's trade war with China and a variety of other things, changes to the ethanol market and whatnot, that are affecting the corn price. I'm looking at it kind of from the standpoint of what happens when we have 2 bad harvests in a row. We can have 1 bad harvest, but since we've had 5 really good harvests previous to that, grain stocks are very high, and maybe the prices won't rise terribly. But remember, we're talking about grain futures prices here. We're not just talking about, spot prices, what you pay at the store. We're talking about futures prices. The commodities traders are supposed to be projecting what the prices are going to be a year from now, 2 years from now. That's what they do in order to coordinate supplies. That's what futures contracts are for. They're there to properly coordinate supply and demand through time. And if we're artificially suppressing the prices of these things today through, at best, half-truths in USDA crop reports, then it's only going to exacerbate any potential food shortages that happen as the planet cools in 2020, 2021, and 2022. It's going to send the wrong pricing signals to the world and to the farmers and to the producers and, to backyard farmers and to everybody else and to land speculators and everybody as to what they should be doing in order to try and keep prices and at a reasonable level and grind out arbitrage. No, what they're doing is they're ingraining and exacerbating the potential arbitrage 2, 3, 4 years down the line. It's crazy. But even that is a little bit off of what I want to talk about today. We have the new ECB chair, Christine Lagarde, who used to run the IMF. She came out the other day and gave her a little speech in front of the European Commission or the European Parliament and said that monetary policy should actually consider climate change. Well, this is just nothing more than a scapegoat. This is her way of pushing off, well, we might have to print a whole bunch of money in order to prepare for climate change. No, you're going to have to print a whole lot of money because you've got tens of trillions of dollars in debt that's going to have to be propped up or written, so that it's not written off. Love. That's what's going to happen. But you're going to use climate change as yet another reason why we have to steal money from the future and steal money from the lower and middle classes and everybody else, because that's what money printing does. Because it is just a tax on poor people. While the rent and the VIG, that money that was printed, and the interest that's paid on the debt that money represents, that all goes to the people like Christine Lagarde. But even worse than all of that, I see a report on Zero Hedge yesterday about Sweden and Greta Thunberg. And it's like they're trying to raise this girl to a level of sainthood. This girl's got PTSD. She's got anxiety disorders, all of this stuff. I don't doubt that she believes that the world is going to end in 12 years because she's been propagandized by her parents to the point of believing the worst paranoia, the worst crazy nonsense. The world's not going to end in 12 years. And to raise this girl to sainthood is unreal and is unbelievably cynical. Because now Sweden is putting her in the curriculum to teach school children about religious knowledge. Right? So now Greta's religion is a good religion. Other religions that have sustained people for thousands of years, though they're bad. The kids are now being told to go out and mock anybody who says bad things about Greta. Well, that's fine. Bring it. I say bad things about Greta all the time. I'm like, hey, bring it. Come on. If I can't outwit a 16-year-old Swedish kid, I'm sorry that I need to get out of this business. So, but we're really down to, this is just another version of if you see something, say something. It's the worst kind of radicalization of children and cynical use of them and brainwashing them to do the bidding of cynical, disgusting, venal adults who just want another swimming pool. It's at this point, I almost sound like a freaking Marxist, but, the Marxists aren't wrong when we start talking about these people. Now, how to change all this is a different story. I mean, this is incredible levels of brainwashing of children into hysterics over something that can't be and hasn't been proven, has a track record worse than the Oakland Raiders of the last 15 years. I mean, they have a terrible track record, these people. They never they never get anything right. And yet we're supposed to continue to believe this hysteria. And worse than that, these are the same people. These incredibly secular humanist, leftists, Marxists, the rest of them. These are all people that decry religion as child abuse and traditional religions as cults. And yet, what are they doing? They're raising climate hysteria to the level of a religion and decrying all heretics and all non-hackers to be bad people. Now we can't even say bad things about climate change on Twitter. Or we're going to be removed from YouTube in a week and a half or so because, we're not allowed to say things like that anymore. Because that's hate speech. Ridiculous. It's insane. And worse, you could see this coming last year, right? We're remarking about this after Parkland. The Parkland shooting, when David, my other shirt is brown hog, was out there being used to front for the anti-gun debate to try and get rid of this push for their grand push to get rid of the Second Amendment here in the United States. And, using a 17-year-old or 16-year-old, however the hell old he is, doesn't really matter. This humorless harpy to harangue us and to give up our guns. And that somehow that makes him immune to ridicule because, adults picking on children is just gauche. Like, are you kidding me? If the kid's wrong, the kid's wrong. He should shut up. And he's wrong. Just like Greta's wrong. For all the same reasons. And it's sad part about this is that I grew up Catholic. I grew up in a Catholic household in upstate New York. My mom was an ex-nun. Couldn't hack it as a nun. So she went into nursing and married my dad and had 4 kids and whole 9 yards. But it's not like she ever stopped being a nun in a certain level. Okay? I understand what this kind of emotional abuse when I see it, because it was all over my household. We used to call my mom Nurse Ratchet, for Christ's sake. We weren't kidding. We were kind of kidding, but we weren't kidding. And this same kind of emotional abuse that they're foisting on kids today, I see it with my daughter over at even at her private school, because most of the kids and most of the faculty there are, they're terrible leftists. But thankfully, most of the teachers are also still open-minded enough that they allow, deplorable people like my daughter to, fight them on this stuff and fight them openly and have her bring counter arguments to the table. And it's a good thing to see that, right? What's sad about this is that ultimately, and to bring it back to the beginning, environmentalism isn't bad. It's just been morphed into this disgusting, toxic thing, polluting the public discourse space in the same way that we're all outraged by unbelievable levels of pollution in our environment. Polluting our environment is terrible. Dumping chemicals in rivers and killing fish, terrible. Sure, polluting the body politic and the intellectual and emotional space that we all occupy on a daily basis with this kind of anxiety porn, which is patently false, is just as bad, if not worse. It's the worst kind of pollution. Marx has been dead and buried as a failed concept. We have the 20th century littered with the bodies of hundreds of millions of people sacrificed on the altar of various Marxist schemes. And they've all, and they are the repudiation of Marxism in every form of it. And yet still we deal with this toxic, unbelievably toxic ideology, because some people want to be the pigs who are more equal than the others. And the reality is that all of this is happening at exactly the wrong moment in time. And you can see that the push for massive change to the legislative environment around the world right now, and the shaming, because they understand that if they can shame and guilt the next generation into believing this stuff, they'll shape the next generation's policies around this pure falsehood, even while we're all shivering and the price of food triples. We're living in an age of plenty. Food prices as a percentage of disposable income are at an all-time low. There are thousands of years. I mean, I think it's at an all-time low over the course of the last 15,000 years. We pay less for food as a percentage of our income than we ever have in the history of man. And so that's created kind of these luxury issues. And we as humans are so programmed to solve problems that when we don't have real problems to solve, like how are we going to eat tomorrow, we invent problems that are not really problems. And one of the very good things about the cooling that's coming over the next, 10 to 15 years is that it's going to refocus a lot of people on the things that actually matter, like survival. And a little survival training is a good thing. It's like watching the Brits go through Brexit. As painful as the whole process is, it's going to make the British people better. It's going to make the next generations of Britons who survive this and win in the long run. It'll make them better people. It may, suck for the next generation, possibly even two, but they'll be better people for it afterwards. It's the adversity that created the spirit here in the United States that built the United States into what it is. It is, in a sense, a Nietzschean universe, right? But at the same time, there's a real timeline, real time pressure that these people are under to get as much of this stuff passed as possible. And I think that's 2022. Ben over at Suspicious Observers was talking about this recently, and he keeps making this point, which is that the IPCC models for the atmosphere are going to change in 2022 when they start putting particle forcing effects into the data sets. Right now, they just look at total solar irradiance, which is effectively a constant. When they start putting in the data for high energy particles, high energy protons and neutrons and all of that stuff, when those data enter into the IPCC models, it's going to rebuke completely the whole CO2 induced global warming paranoia. And then what do? And they have a program. They want us all in electric cars that have a 75-mile range so that we can't live out in the middle of nowhere. We all have to live in burbclaves and in high rises. We don't need cars. They can keep control over us at all times, and we can use digital currency in a cashless society. with a complete surveillance state everywhere where our phones spy on us. And it's all just this kind of Phil Dickian dystopia of suck. And that's what, Saint Greta wants. That's the future that these people want. A humorless life of subsistence and total surveillance, wearing sackcloth and ashes. While we feel guilty over even having that. That's not the future I signed up for. That's not the future I'm going to allow my child to grow up into. But I'm preparing her for it. All right, well, this has been real. This has been fun. I don't know that it's been real fun, but this has been the Gold, Goats, and Guns podcast for Tuesday, December 3rd, 2019. You guys take care. You be well. We'll talk soon. Keep your stick on the ice.